When this story opens, there were two things of paramount interest in Dymchurch. One was Romney Marsh, visited, so the villagers whispered, by flaming demon riders. The other was Dr. SYN, their kindly, well-loved vicar. To be sure, it was a little incongruous at times to hear this godly man break out into the most ungodly refrain, "Here's to the feet what have walked the plank, yo-ho for the dead man's throttle," for that was the favourite song of the redoubtable pirate Captain Clegg, but he had been hanged, so it was said, years before. On a wild, wet November night, in the latter part of the 18th century, a great lumbering coach creaked and groaned as its steaming team was lashed at speed along Stone Street, that bleak country road between Canterbury and Lymm. The mud-spattered coach doors bore the armorial bearings of His Grace the Archbishop of Canterbury, whose august person was being shaken about inside. Accompanying him were General Troubridge of the Dragoons and Major Faunce. They were journeying to Lymm Castle to be the guests of Sir Henry Pembury. At its southern extremity, Stone Street plunges down a steep incline overtopped by ancient trees. On this stormy night it looked like a tunnel of blackness as the horses were pulled up to allow the guard and coachman to climb down and adjust the skids. Not relishing a delay at such a gloomy spot, the Archbishop called out, "Anything wrong?" "No, sir," said the coachman. "But there will be if you don't take your foot from the step," cried a gruff voice from the darkness. The coachman turned as a masked rider on a black horse rode from the trees. "Jimmy Bone, the highwayman." "What's going on?" asked the General, thrusting his head out of the window. "Anything wrong now?" "Plenty, my old gentleman," laughed Mr. Bone, riding closer. "To begin with, the weather's all wrong." "Who the devil are you?" roared the General. "Better known on the Dover Road than here, sir," replied the highwayman. "And the guards of His Majesty's mails will tell you that Mr. Bone executes his business with what politeness he can, but prompt payments are essential. I see you're a military gentleman. So just you pass the word of command to your companions and turn them out one by one so that I can see the linings of your pockets. We'll start with you, my old soldier." General Troubridge was too wise a man not to realise that his sabre was of no avail against a horse pistol. "It's no use, gentlemen. We're stung." "It's outrageous!" cried Major Faunce, as the General opened the coach door. "Now then, Mr. Guard," said the highwayman, "as each pocket is turned out, you'll hand me the contents. You first, General." A gold watch, a purse of guineas, and a signet ring were the only items that attracted Mr. Bone's interest. The purse and watch he dropped into the pocket of his riding-coat, but the ring he gave back to the guard, saying, "A family ring. I'll not rob a gentleman of his crest. Give it to the General, and I'll take your spurs, sir, instead." "Damn it, they're part of my uniform. Take 'em off. We'll have your boots and breeches too." Fuming with rage, the General handed over his spurs. "Thank you, General," laughed Jimmy Bone. "Now inside with you. Let's see the property of the other officer." Major Faunce produced 2 purses and a gold watch. Jimmy Bone cast an inquisitive eye upon his sabretache. "Full of military papers, no doubt. Hand it over, my officer. Next passenger, please." When the highwayman saw his next victim's clerical garb, he uttered an oath for which he quickly apologised. "A parson, eh? An old witch once told me that if I robbed a servant of the Lord, my luck would be out. So return to your seat, sir, and thank God for his uniform that has saved your scanty purse." The delighted Archbishop turned back to the coach, but the guard sprang forward. "Mind the step, your Grace." "Grace?" repeated the highwayman. "Why, bless me, so it is. Well, sir, I'll not break my rule even for you, who no doubt carries more guineas than your military companions." As soon as the coach door was closed, Jimmy Bone gave a cheery wave, and crying out, "My compliments, gentlemen," he turned his magnificent horse and galloped into the blackness. "I shall hunt him down and attend his hanging with great relish," the General said angrily. "I wonder, sir," said Major Faunce, "could this rascal also be the Scarecrow of Romney Marsh?" The General shook his head. "It's been proved conclusively that they are not the same. However, it makes no difference now, for I swear that I will bring not only the Scarecrow, but this highwayman to book before very long. We'll see what our host has to say about it tonight. Sir Henry is a justice of the peace, and as Lord of Lymm he must, for his own honour, give us every assistance." "I'm sure he will," said the Archbishop, "and so will the Squire of Dymchurch, Sir Anthony Cobtree." "I'm not so sanguine about that, gentlemen," put in the Major. "He's apt to get very testy when outside people interfere with his rule upon the Marsh. I think the wisest man to consult would be Dr. SYN, his vicar. He's always out amongst his Marsh flock, and no doubt he has a great deal more confidences than the Squire." The Archbishop nodded. "I will speak to Dr. SYN myself." Jimmy Bone, meanwhile, was galloping hard along the winding roads of Romney Marsh. At last he saw the cottage he was making for. It was inhabited by an old witch named Mother Handaway. She was a harmless creature, but her cats, her cauldron, and her eccentricities caused her to be shunned by God-fearing folk. The isolation of the old woman suited our highwayman perfectly, especially as she owned a cunningly hidden stable. It was built below ground and accessed from the steep side of a dry dyke. It had been made many years ago as a smuggler's hide. Uttering a curious whistle, Jimmy Bone leapt his horse from the road across the fields. Mother Handaway heard his signal, and by the time the horseman entered the yard she had opened the secret door. At the far end of the stable the highwayman saw another black horse, bigger-boned and fiercer than his fine animal. "So, Mother, the Scarecrow does not ride tonight."
"Word has been passed for next Thursday," she replied. "A greater landing of contraband than has ever been attempted."
"Well, I didn't do so badly myself tonight," laughed the highwayman, emptying his coat pocket of the treasures. "2 gallant officers and a parson whom I didn't rob, you'll be pleased to hear." He sat on a bench and emptied the contents of the sabretache beside him while the old witch attended to his horse. "Just routine stuff here. Disposition of troops. Hello, though. What's this?" He held one of the papers closer to the stable lantern. Then he jumped to his feet. "Here's a pretty piece of military knavery. The Scarecrow must know of this at once. Store the goods for me, Mother. It's a mercy I took these papers, or the Scarecrow would have wakened on Friday morning in Dover Castle."
"He'd be a match for 'em even there, dearie,"
cackled the old witch.
"He's the very devil, he is. Still, good luck to him, for the devil looks after his own, as I know."
And so, once more, Mr. Bone set his horse at a gallop across the marsh to Dymchurch. Meanwhile, with the help of a roaring fire, a bowl of hot rum punch, and good Virginia tobacco, Dr. Christopher SYN, D.D., Vicar of Dymchurch under the Wall and Dean of the Peculiars of Romney Marsh, was managing pretty well to forget the storm outside. His conversation with Sexton Mipps turned on cargoes, names of vessels, and skippers. The two men presented a marked contrast. Dr. SYN, as he rose to relight his churchwarden pipe from the candle, looked tall, gaunt, and elegant. His free hand swept back a stray lock of his raven-black hair, which he wore long and loose to his shoulders. He never wore the formal white wig of the clergy. The sexton was small and wiry, with an inquisitive nose like a sniffing terrier's, and he always showed a loyal appreciation of his master's greatness, whether as a parson, pirate, or smuggler. Suddenly the vicar changed the subject of contraband by asking, "Did you bring me the coil of rope I asked for?" "Left it in the hall, sir. I'll get it." When Mipps reappeared with vast coils over his shoulder, he found his master writing in a notebook he had never seen before. Looking up, the vicar smiled. "Mark the cover, my little sexton. It is black. A black book. Do you remember we had such a book aboard the pirate ship, that it contained the names of all our suspected traitors and enemies on the Spanish Main? Well, such a book may prove of value to us here. Aye, my hearty, this is the Black Book of Romney Marsh." "Who's in it?" asked Mipps eagerly. "You shall know in good time, but at the moment I happen to be more interested in the rope. Cut me a length that will go twice around my body, with enough to make a knot in the small of my back." Mipps measured the required length quickly. "Now," continued the vicar, Lashed me up with a running chink. You mean one of them dodgy knots that the Chinese juggler taught us in Malay? Exactly. The vicar lay face downwards on the hearthrug, while Mipps adjusted the rope and pulled the curious knot tight. Try it. The parson strained his pinioned arms till he drew his breath in pain. That's good. He then rolled over onto his back. Now cut the coils in the centre of my chest. Mipps did as he was told. But what is it for? Dr. SYN got to his knees. Observe. I throw the knot over my back, so. I grip the ends beneath me, so. And when I lie down upon my face, I am hiding the loose ends beneath my body, but still keeping them taut. Now, Dr. SYN chuckled, don't you see that it might be very useful to appear to be trussed up by villains? Very convincing, sir. Also, my good Mipps, it takes the Scarecrow some minutes to transform himself into the Vicar of Dymchurch. So far this has not mattered much, but there could be occasions when a man's life hangs on seconds rather than minutes. In future, therefore, the Scarecrow's rags will cover the parson's cloth, and from now on, whenever the Scarecrow rides, he will carry this rope sewn into his long cloak. Suddenly, SYN raised his hand. Listen. There's a horse on the gravel. Mipps picked up his blunderbuss, crossed the hall, and undid the front door. Outside stood the rain-soaked figure of Jimmy Bone. "Quick!" urged the highwayman. "I must see the vicar at once." Now Jimmy Bone had had good cause in the past to trust the Vicar of Dymchurch, so on entering the vicarage he did not hesitate to remove his black silk mask. The vicar had also learnt long since that he could trust the highwayman, and so had allowed him to share with Mipps the secret of the Scarecrow's identity. "My faith!" cried Dr. SYN when he saw his visitor. "Come in, man, and warm yourself inside and out." "I've no time but for the matter in hand, sir." "Nonsense! I will not listen to a word you say until you've consumed a glass of hot punch, and you may speak while I refill it." So Jimmy Bone swallowed the first glass, while the genial cleric waited with a punch ladle to replenish it. "My haste concerns both of us, sir. I have news that you must hear at once, and for myself, well, when I tell you that I have just held up another coach and taken toll of it, you will see my necessity for getting speedily back to Mother Handaways and safe hiding." "You've taken toll, have you?" cried Dr. SYN. "Then I take it you have dutifully sought me out to pay legal tithe out of your illegal gains." This was not altogether a joke, because it was part of Mr. Bone's curious code of honour to pay the parson a tenth of all of his ill-gotten gains for the church's sick and needy fund. "You shall certainly have your tithe, reverend sir. There are trinkets and purses. I might have had more had my conscience forbade me rob a parson." "Well, parsons are not rich men, as a rule, Mr. Bone." "No, but I'm sure the Archbishop carries a few guineas when he travels. However, I contented myself with the 2 officers." "What, you rascal, you robbed my old friend General Troubridge and Major Faunce?" "I heard they were accompanying his Grace to Lymm." "I think you've little cause to call them your friends, sir, for they were hot on your track once." "Aye, and will be again," laughed SYN. "Indeed, I have but a few minutes ago entered their names in my black book." "You are right there, sir," said Bone, handing over a document. "I robbed a major of this. Read it. Someone has betrayed the Scarecrow. The run planned for Thursday is known to the authorities, and the dragoons intend taking the Scarecrow prisoner." Dr. SYN read the document and then chuckled. A full regiment of dragoons moved from Canterbury to Dover Castle to be in readiness, eh? That shows a serious antagonism against this Scarecrow, whoever he may be. Mipps and Jimmy Bone exchanged a wink. "But you can stop the Thursday run, I take it?" said the highwayman. "Oh, I do not think the Scarecrow would do that, do you?" replied the doctor innocently. "No, but if you will return me the trinkets and the money so that I can take them to the General, I will not only see to it that you are compensated for your loss, but will be told the exact plans they are about to make." "If it is to serve the Scarecrow, whoever he may be," smiled the highwayman, "why, I'll return the full swag and be damned to the compensation." "Thank you," said SYN. "Now, have another drink, and then get away into hiding. Mipps will call on you for the goods." The next evening, in the Dymchurch pulpit, the Archbishop thundered out disapproval of the Scarecrow and Mr. Bone. He urged strongly that it was the duty of every law-abiding citizen to assist the authorities in bringing the rascals to justice, and practically accused the congregation of being in a position to do so. Sir Henry Pembury, who accompanied the Archbishop with General Troubridge and Major Faunce, went even further, for during supper at the courthouse he lost his temper and stated that their host, Sir Anthony Cobtree, if not an actual participant in the smuggling, was at least sympathetic. High words ensued, and eventually Sir Henry called for his coach and drove back to Lim Castle with his guests in the highest dudgeon. "I do believe the old fool takes me for the Scarecrow, Christopher," said Sir Anthony. "Well, that at least I should take as a great compliment," replied SYN, smiling. "You are still as good in the saddle, Tony, as ever you were, so at least you might qualify for the Scarecrow's horsemanship." "Which is more than can be said of you," laughed Sir Anthony. "Until you learn to handle an animal more fiery than your fat white pony, no one will suspect you of being the Scarecrow." The vicar laughed too, thinking of the great fierce beast called Gehenna, which the Scarecrow rode, and which the squire could never have managed. 2 days later, Dr. SYN rose early, mounted his white pony, and, accompanied by Mipps, made his way to Dover Castle. Owing to the fact that the cavalry had been billeted with the infantry garrison, there was confusion at the gate. He was kept waiting by the sentries, and in a mild way he complained as he adjusted his scholarly glasses and shook hands with General Troubridge. "I'm a busy man, General. In short, I was very distressed to hear of your misfortune with that audacious highwayman, and was the more determined to do the little in my power to rectify your loss. I have recovered your property, sir, watches, purses, papers." "You mean you confronted this highwayman?" "I could hardly do that, General, since I had no idea where to find him, but I happen to know a woman of the Marsh with whom he has been keeping company. She is ill, and I visited her. I reasoned with her, and on a sacred promise that I would not divulge her name, she confessed that this notorious highwayman had made her a gift of your property. The woman I do not blame. She has got into the company of a wicked man." "Well, since you gave your word, we will not betray her," said the General, largely. "But there is something else I discovered," went on the parson. "On leaving this woman's sick-bed, I happened to overhear a conversation between some men below stairs. In brief, sir, the robbing of your papers has informed the smugglers that you know the intended headquarters of the Scarecrow for the run of contraband, planned apparently for next Thursday. How you knew about this run is no business of mine. But I'll tell you. I got in touch with a certain man whom I strongly suspect has been a smuggler himself. On the promise of a 50-guinea purse for the King's protection, he betrayed this Scarecrow, telling me that his headquarters are to be at Wallen's barn. Ah, but that has changed. The Scarecrow will now use a deserted house on the Hythe Road called Cade's Farm." The General beamed. "I am greatly indebted to you, sir. And as for this run on Thursday, why, they may land every keg and barrel for aught I shall interfere. No, sir, neither shot nor man will I spare on customs business save to put a halter around the Scarecrow's neck. And once I have him here... But come with me, and I'll show you where I mean to house this villain until I hang him." The General led Dr. SYN to the top of the castle, to a large, bare room with a great window devoid of glass. "This will be the Scarecrow's prison." "Those iron bars are very wide," remarked the doctor. "A thin man might well squeeze through them." The General laughed. "It would but save the hangman. Look." Dr. SYN climbed onto the window-sill and peered down through the bars. "What a height!" he shivered. "Never had a head for them myself. It would be an unpleasant drop, certainly. I shall post a sentry in the courtyard, and another outside this door." Back in the General's quarters, the pompous soldier again thanked the doctor for his loyal services, and asked if there was anything he could do in return. "Well, yes. I should like to visit this Scarecrow, if he is caught. I am somewhat successful in recalling sinners to repentance." "Come when you please, sir. Here is your pass on my authority. Call the sinner to repentance if you are so minded. For my own part, I should let him go to hell." and so Dr. SYN left the castle with a warrant from the General to visit the criminal. And as he said to Mipps on the long ride home, so sure is he of catching this scarecrow that it seems a sin to disappoint him.
Put such ideas out of your head, sir.
My good Mipps, it is time the scarecrow gained the reputation of being supernatural. We must strike terror into the hearts of our followers as well as of our enemies. I do not like the thought of a traitor in our midst. That night, Dr. SYN, once more closeted with Mipps, laid plans and gave orders, while the sexton marvelled at his master's daring. His apprehensions were shared by every man upon the Marsh that Thursday night, especially when it became known that the dragoons had trotted in full strength through Hythe. But the scarecrow, on his fierce black horse Gehenna, rode among them, laughing at their fears and declaring that no regiment would attack his men. A general nervousness prevailed, however, and did not cease till the last vessel had put back to sea empty, and the last pack-pony had reached the hills to hide its goods. The scarecrow rode at a fast trot beside Jimmy Bone. Presently he drew rein.
"No nearer. I'll foot the rest. You take my Gehenna back to the stable."
"And if anything goes wrong," replied the highwayman, "why, I'll storm the castle single-handed and release you, or go hang for it." The scarecrow shook his head.
"So long as this gale continues, I am safe enough."
And handing his reins to his companion, he strode off towards the trap he knew was set for him. Some 2 hours later, Major Faunce entered the General's rooms. "All's well, sir. Thanks to Dr. SYN, the scarecrow's safe in the tower room. He's a repulsive-looking devil, drunk and very ribald. The whole regiment was half afraid of him." "He'll be afraid of us in the morning," laughed the delighted General. That night the gale continued to howl around the castle. In the grey dawn, Mipps entered the main gates behind a string of vegetable carts, and walked up to where a cavalry sentry was talking to an infantry guard. "Here we are again," he said cheerily. The cavalryman thought the infantryman knew him. The infantryman thought the same of his colleague, so Mipps passed unchallenged and made straight for the tower stairway. Up to the top he went, and approached the sentry. "Who are you?" demanded the sentry. "Servant to the parson what has come to urge the prisoner to holy repentance, Dr. SYN. He's with the General now. Here's the warrant." "My word, what awful language is he using in there?" "Aye, what with that and the cold of these stone walls, it's the worst guard I ever mounted." "Well, I've something here to keep out the cold." "Halves, mate." And Mipps, drawing a bottle of brandy from his pocket, drank some and then passed it to the sentry. The sentry gulped it down with thanks. "Good stuff. I could do with a cask of that. I ain't got a cask on me, but I've another bottle. Here, have first go." The soldier had hardly taken his share when his eyes glazed, and he fell to the ground. "Aye, that was opium, that was," Mipps chuckled. He drew out a third bottle and poured brandy over the soldier's tunic. Then he tapped on the cell door. "Ready?" "Ready," came the answer. Then there came a piercing yell that wakened the whole castle. Mipps flew down the stairs, shouting for Major Faunce. A sentry far below looked up to the tower, and to his unspeakable horror he saw a black shape crawling through the bars. Then the thing leapt outwards above his head. The gale caught it, and right over the walls and out to sea whirled the wild rags of the scarecrow. With a scream, the sentry bolted for the guard-room. "What is it?" demanded the Major. "What ain't it?" reported Mipps. "Oh, sir, rescue my master. The scarecrow's killing him." "Oh, poor Dr. SYN visiting the prisoner on the General's orders, too, and that drunken rogue of a guard locking him in because he was afraid to go in himself." And it seemed that the sexton was speaking the truth. The sentry was drunk. It was with some apprehension that Major Faunce unlocked the cell door. His worst fears were justified. There, groaning on the floor, lay Dr. SYN, tied around with rope. "Undo these cords! They're killing me!" he moaned. "Let me do it, Major," said Mipps. "I was a sailor in Her Majesty's Navy afore I took up the sextoning. I knows knots." Mipps unravelled the cruel knot, and while Major Faunce raised the doctor, Mipps secreted the ropes in his capacious pocket. "But where's the prisoner?" demanded the General, who had been summoned by the noise. "I can tell you," gasped Dr. SYN pathetically. "The Scarecrow attacked me, secured me with these ropes which he ripped from his cloak, and then... Oh, God, I can hardly believe what I saw. He wriggled through the bars there and leapt. Unless he is the devil, you will find him crushed on the cobblestones below." But instead of any report of a mangled body came the disquieting version of what the sentry had seen, namely a black figure with a great winged cloak that flew out over the castle walls.
"Are all the sentries drunk?" roared the General.
But other soldiers came forward, and Dover townsmen too, who swore they had also seen the strange phenomenon soaring out to sea. The General, after venting his rage upon the drunkard, whom he ordered into solitary confinement, at least showed some humanity towards Dr. SYN, who appeared to be suffering from shock. "'Pon my soul, Faunce," he said, "but I am sorry for the parson. He comes all the way to Dover when he hears of the arrest, then gets woefully treated for his pains. He don't bear me any grudge. He said so when I put him in my coach and sent him back to Dymchurch. He's a kindly fellow." Mipps rode back alone with the vicar's pony, but he made the most of his journey, for on a lonely strip of beach beyond Sandgate he retrieved the Scarecrow's clothes that had floated in with the tide. While congratulating himself that they had all come ashore, he noticed that they were roughly stitched together by packthread.
"He's a marvel. Thinks of everything. No wonder he looked like a man."
When he reached Dymchurch, the vicar was reported ill in bed, but Mipps was allowed to see him. The sexton tiptoed into the bedroom and winked at the night-capped vicar. "I hear you have been to Dover, my good Mipps," said Dr. SYN. "Fine old castle there, I believe. They tell me there's a window in the tower called the Scarecrow's Leap. Nice things, legends. I like 'em. And while I think of it, find out that sentry's name. We owe him compensation. A bag of guineas with the Scarecrow's compliments, I think."
"Yes, sir. Any more orders, Vicar?"
"Yes. Brandy." And Dr. SYN fell to chuckling.